Good afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes. Just want to make sure we have an audience that is awake. After lunch is always difficult to create that atmosphere, but I'm happy to be here, and I want to thank the organizers from FUNCLODE, especially the president of FUNCLODE, our dear friend, former president of the Dominican Republic, Leonel Fernandez, for inviting me. We had a very nice talk a couple of months ago in the Dominican Republic, and Dominican Republic in many ways is so much engaged with the inter-American system and with the OAS. It's great to have this opportunity as well, President. The Executive Director of FUNCLODE, and there are so many persons I know from before, so I'm not going to mention the names, but I want to thank you all for having an interest of being here and to listen to some perspectives. Again, we only have 20 minutes to present some views about the Americas, but I understand there are far better experienced scholars who will follow me, and they will tell you the details about it. So I'm going to be very high level. But let me say that it is great to be in such a high learning environment. Always, a university is always a pleasant place to be. I've always experienced like things can happen, and I hope that we feel the same way here today. The theme of this forum is basically to analyze the political realities that in one or the other way shape our future and our hemisphere. And this happens in a very interesting time frame. Global challenges, if we want to be very diplomatic, we say interesting times. And then you can fill in the interesting however you want from your own perspective. But it is challenging, it's complex, and in many ways complicated. That's the global environment. 2 wars taking place in the world. That has an impact on politics, on international relations, on economies, on social systems, name it. But that's not all. Many more things are happening in our world. AI, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, a new dimension of interest for society that needs to be catered to as well, both from the positive and the negative. I'll speak to that a little bit later. So these global developments impact us as well, the region. And the regional political panorama, the regional political outlook as a consequence will change. The question is how, in what way? And that is something for scholars to be looking at, analyzing those, but also for politicians, parliamentarians, prime ministers, presidents to take account of those new challenges which are taking place. So I want to share with you the global challenges I mentioned. We have nationalistic policies, deepening geopolitics, with major impacts for the region and for the individual countries. We have an eroding global system of cooperation, regretfully. Many would say in some form there is even absence of global cooperation in terms of multilateralism, the role of the UN Security Council. We are here in New York this week, and you can follow all the debates. But the bottom line is we need a global rule-based system. It is maybe not the most ideal situation, but is the best functioning one to maintain peace and prosperity in our world. And as I said, we have major global challenges which we need to undertake. The consequence of that behavior of individual states and sometimes collectivities is also that in the way it turns out in the practice, it creates uncertainty, unpredictability, and if those two things go together, you get anxiety in the world. And you see that also. There is no certainty about where we are going, what the future holds. In the Americas, for instance, because of this behavior at a global level, the geopolitics, and it's becoming more a divisive world in that sense. Sometimes it's temporary, and that is the complexity of it. Before you could say it's going to stay for decades, a duality in a global sense. In today's world, in 6 months' time, the politics are different again. So it is really difficult to manage and navigate the new political global landscape as well. But you know what it does in practice is that it requires member states to make choices. You're either this side or you're considered to be the other side. And that is a difficult situation for countries which have no influence on that dynamic at a global level. So that dynamic plays into this now as well. And for the Americas, it is really a challenge. And why possibly it is a challenge for us? 20% of the G20 member states, which make up global politics and global economics, are part of this hemisphere, with the largest part of this as well. So that is the United States, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. Now you see here already division between the North and the South. What positions do we take? How are we forced to make choices if you're also part of a global system of richest countries? So that is an added situation. We have also the need, which was indicated for many years now, the need for reconstruction of the global architecture, especially the financial architecture, the Bretton Woods institutions, the WTO. That has an impact on how we operate in our Western Hemisphere as well. You see new alliances being built. It has an impact on multilateralism. There is a skepticism with regard to multilateralism. In my view, unfounded. Multilateralism delivers, but what has been not done well by the same multilateral institutions is showcase the value of these institutions. Like the OAS, we have not demonstrated where the value is of the OAS. So I'm very much in line with, in my view, a legitimate question of the United States and other countries to say, show me the value of my investment. Where and how does it impact democracy, human rights, rule of law, well-organized elections, and so on? It's a legitimate question. If you invest in a company, you want to see investments returning to you. What I am saying is we are doing a lot. The strategic interests of many countries are being served, and in no uncertain ways. So it is up to us to tell the narrative, to tell the story about the OAS. And by that time, I am sure that a confidence level in multilateralism, at least in the Western Hemisphere, will grow, and nobody will doubt anymore that the investment in the OAS has been a profitable one. And a profitable one in the sense, as I say it, for many countries it's 5 to 10 times more support in financial terms than what they spent into it. I can give you examples, but we'll put that in a document soon to come. Now, we do have an electoral, in the Americas, an electoral schedule coming up of, in 2025, 2026. In the 32 active members of the OAS, in 18 of those, there will be elections or have been elections held. And that is going to create a new political panorama in the hemisphere. In some cases, it will switch from left to right. In other cases, it will remain, but possibly with less electoral support. But in any case, in some countries, it will be a difficult trajectory in terms of the electoral process. We will see a difference, and that means the way we look at the hemisphere today may be different the way we're going to look at it in 2 years' time. Okay? So 18 out of the 32 is almost 2/3 of the membership of the OAS, and this happens not in small countries, this happens in large countries of the hemisphere where indeed influence will be exercised. This happens, elections taking place now happens in the context also of a sliding level of confidence in democracies, in democratic systems, in governance system. The figures are there. You can read them, and I'm sure Professor Paz will tell you about it. The figures are there. There is a measurable decline in confidence in the political system. Now, we can talk long about how we correct that. I think it's not the electoral systems in the first place that create less confidence. If I may be so blunt, I think it's up to the politicians to create more confidence in the politics, in the nature of politics. And that is an issue for us all to take on board. President Fernandez and I had a discussion just now about the role of education in our societies. And our debate went so far to say, education is key. I support that wholeheartedly, to create just, fair, and educated people, professional in their approach, contributing to societies. But what it does also, it provides for young political leadership. That is also a different dimension of this panorama. It's not only government switching from left to right or right to left, but it is also in the depth of the agenda, which is going to be driven by young political leaders. In 10 years' time, it will look quite different, because most of the politicians who are now leading countries will have been changed. So, and then we're going to have talks about AI much more, and cybersecurity, and all kinds of other research and development-based processes in our societies. So, I'm giving you a panorama where there is uncertainty up to a certain level, but education is going to be key. I said sliding confidence in governance systems. I think politicians can do more about that to improve that. Extreme poverty and economic uncertainty in our hemisphere. It is regrettable that our hemisphere is almost twice as many people living in Europe has a limited footprint on the global stage. It's really limited. And this is one of the visions I have for this hemisphere, which I will talk at the end about. There is enormous growth potential in the Western Hemisphere. The question is only, why don't we mobilize it? Why is not put to use in our hemisphere? And there are reasons for it. Come back to that. Now, public debt issues, security, organized crime, the issue of limited attention, although it's increasing, to AI, interconnectivity, new technologies in our hemisphere, climate change crisis, which is a real thing for many countries. We see also divisiveness in political terms in the hemisphere. Some of them depend on the relationships between presidents. Some of them are more ideological. But there is polarization in our hemisphere, which is also not good to create that future of the Americas. Because if we're going to focus only on the challenges and the negatives and not look forward to what can be done, then we will not make progress. And that is what is happening right now. So we have challenges, we have issues which we need to address, but at the same time, we have to remain resilient. Now the question will be, for all of us to answer, and I don't have those answers, okay? Maybe in the future, in the coming weeks or months, we will develop some. The question is, once we have this slate of elections already taking place, and once we have a new set of leaders in 2 years' time, end of 26, what will be the situation on the basis of what is happening globally and in our own hemisphere? The realities are there. We know the global challenges. The reality of the hemisphere is we have a new political leadership. The question is, will there be more certainty or less certainty? Will there be more or less progress? Will there be more or less division or if you want to say it from the positive side, more unity rather than divisiveness. That is the question. That will depend on political leadership, whether it can establish that. And in some way, we need to induce that in some way. And I think the Summit of the Americas in Punta Cana in early December will provide a unique, possibly historic opportunity to design a future for the hemisphere which looks different, which will focus on a couple of other issues which will I address at the end. So we cannot afford disunity and divisiveness to continue in the Americas. For me, that's a given. We cannot continue the same path. That would be the wrong way because it doesn't create progress. Now, we need to foster much more than now, and I've been proving that in the past 3 months, more dialogue with member states, more dialogue among member states, and we are fostering that. I've been meeting with member states in the OAS to talk about issues every 2 months with the sub-regional groups, with the whole constituency. In fact, Monday we'll have such a meeting again on budget issues. You need to bring the member states together. You cannot have a leadership in the hemisphere that is deciding on its own. You need a membership behind you and part of it, create ownership. And I think it's working. But we need not only bring the memberships together, we need to bring the Inter-American system together, like Inter-American Development Bank, the IICA, the PAHU. Those institutions have been doing things on their own. There is no coherent agenda in terms of execution of within the Inter-American system. Since I took office, twice already, we met at the highest levels of all these institutions for the first time in so many years, so many decades. So we need to foster dialogue, respect for each other. And when I say respect, even if we have different views, I feel that we need to still talk to each other. Even, that's maybe old-fashioned diplomacy, but that's the only way to do it. You need to continue a dialogue. But we have seen over the past decade, 2 member states of the OAS left the OAS. That is the worst thing a global or a regional organization can overcome, to lose members. While we want to increase membership, we lost 2. Not small countries, important countries. We may have different views about how they look at society and how they look at democracy, how they manage democracy and so on, apart from that. But they left. And why? The confidence in the OAS was not there. The confidence that the OAS can be a place which is an honest broker, which can provide a seat for every single member state to sit, be respected, be listened to, even if you have a different opinion. Even if you have a different opinion. And I think that's the kind of multilateralism we need still today, that we need everybody around the OAS table. It used to be like that. So I'm not saying that this will happen within 5 years again, and it will take a lot of work to get them back at the table, but it's to the benefit of all to have all member states together. The majority of our problems in our hemisphere, that's why the skepticism is unfounded and wrongly argued. The majority of our problems in the Western Hemisphere is multilateral in nature. It's not bilateral. It requires cooperation between member states. How do we solve a problem if we don't talk to each other? And I was in Belize just recently. The adjacency zone, which is an office, which is a special mission, which is a special representative from the OAS, provides assistance to both countries, Guatemala and Belize, to maintain peace, to stay on course of finding a lasting, well-negotiated resolution on the border, the territorial referendum between those 2 countries. It's working. It's functioning. It's an example to the whole world that also territorial referenda like that can be resolved. And possibly in 2 years it will be resolved forever. Something which was inherited, by the way, from our colonial powers before. And most of our problems in that regard are inherited. Well, okay, we don't need to look backwards, we look forward. We need to take charge of it and determine our own destiny. That's a message. But this is an example. Look at Haiti. I know the Dominican Republic has a special interest, your sister nations on the same island. We have been able to foster unity around support for resolving the problems of Haiti. I know there is a lot of disappointment, there is a lot of fatigue, there is a lot of time this has been tried out. But the unity which was demonstrated less than 2 weeks ago in the OAS with a joint statement on Haiti, on the way forward, was unique. We did a special press conference on that, simply to say the hemisphere can work together if we put our minds to it. So we have a lot of work to do in the hemisphere. And I have two very firm watch keepers here. So I have 5 minutes left according to the program. But what I want to say is that we can create a better hemisphere. The Inter-American Democratic Charter, we have the tools to apply them. We will apply them. But let me go to what our vision is for this hemisphere based on the realities which we face, the realities of a different political landscape, possibly a conflicting landscape. How are we going to do that? Now, I hope in December in Punta Cana to deliver an address that will be upbeat, create excitement with political leaders and member states and the people, that will focus not on what divides us, but what unites us. The diversity which we all represent here is an enormous diversity, but there is common ground. So let's not look at what divides us, but what unites us. And we're going to identify the areas. At least 2 areas will have an agenda, which is directly related to the original purpose of the OAS. I like to see a strong, resilient, multilateral system where member states take ownership of the future agenda. A future agenda that must be shared, must be common. But it will have 2 major elements. One is a peace agenda which will have several components, because in the diversity which the Americas represent, some countries have different interests, strategic interests. Other regions have different interests. The Caribbean has different interests than Central America. The Central Americans have a different interest than South America. That is not to keep us divided, but we have to recognize it. And based on that, create an OAS that will cater for all these interests in an equal manner. That is also. And it must be done through dedicated effort. You will not hear me speak about, I will not add to more conflict. Let me put it this way. I'm not built like that because I want to see results. I will not put myself in a place where I will take sides between countries. I don't do that because that's not my role. That's not my job. My job is to find solutions going forward, present scenarios. Because otherwise we will have that divisiveness in the hemisphere continue. We're not doing that. We want a united hemisphere, and therefore the peace agenda is focusing on democracy, on human rights, on rule of government, rule of law, on good governance, fighting corruption, looking at education and social systems, providing just, fair society. Some countries in our hemisphere need that. Then the second one is the prosperity agenda. And that goes into creating a peaceful, secure hemisphere, but a prosperous one. One where the people of the Americas have an opportunity to benefit from what governments are supposed to do. Create economic opportunities, create jobs, facilitate investment, trade flows between countries. We are not trading enough. It's less than 15% between our countries in this hemisphere. I mean, that is unbelievable. We can be richer, I'm convinced of that, than Europe is. Because we have all the rare minerals, we do have clever people, we have a population, a market size, we have a growing middle class, we have all those opportunities. So our prosperity agenda will focus on that. Now, I think ultimately that's the interest of the people of the Americas, nothing else. Peace on the one hand and prosperity on the other hand. Nobody wants to leave their country, speaking about migration and the response to that, leave their country simply because they want to. No, they are forced to leave because of insecurity, because of underdevelopment. So we want to have a whole of society approach, not only in terms of democracy, involving civil society, private sector, and so on. We want a whole of the Americas approach as well. And that means involving the private sector to create jobs. It's not governments do that. To have the Americas connect better with each other, by sea, by air, by road, and digitally. How many of us, and I'll close with that, how many of us travel to the Caribbean? Or how many Caribbeans travel to South America for holidays? How many connecting flights are there? And that is untapped opportunity. So the private sector must see benefit to that. If we create one Americas, which is prosperous, we will have a larger footprint globally not only, but we will secure this region as a zone of peace. And that's the ultimate goal we want. Nobody wants war in any place. Nobody wants conflict in any place. What we need is a different mindset about where the opportunities lie. And there are enormous opportunities. $6 billion is being imported in the Caribbean in food alone from outside this hemisphere. 6 billion. If we can only cater for 4 billion among ourselves, that's enormous. I'm speaking about the region which is the smallest part of the hemisphere in terms of population size. So I'm not speaking about Central America with 60 million or South America with 300-400 million. So again, let us, on the one hand, not be disappointed or discouraged. We must embrace the changes which will come, but we will have to embrace those with our heads up and with concrete ideas. The peace and prosperity agenda is an agenda that will serve every single country well. I can't imagine any leader saying, I don't want this in Punta Cana. If that happens, something is wrong. And that is what we have to fight. And I hope at some point in 10 years, Mr. President, through education, we will have a new political leadership in the hemisphere which will deal with these upcoming challenges of AI and cybersecurity much more effectively than we can do, and our political leaders at this point can do. And I can tell you one thing, this impact on our societies will not give us time to talk about other things. It will impact every segment, every bone of our society. I thank you very much. I'm sorry I had to rush this, but I hope it's useful. Thank you.